I know nowadays, many abilities know about the cell before we take it to the complex form and systemic parts. Now, we must know about what we call cell junction, also known as membrane junction. So, what is cell junction? Cell junction simply means or can be defined as the junction between the cell or junction between a cell and extracellular matrix. See that? The junction, the contact and the junction between a cell to cell, or the junction between the cell and extracellular matrix. That's what we call what? Cell junction, also known as membrane junction. Now, here is cell junction and membrane junction that we call cell junction and membrane junction. The communication between a cell to cell or communication between a cell to extracellular matrix. There are three types or classification of cell junction. We have occluding junction, communicating junction, and anchoring junction. Now, let me take it from the occluding junction. So, what are occluding junction? Occluding junction are type of cell junction that does not allow the communication of larger molecule ion. This is that an electrolyte. They don't allow communication of larger molecule ion and electrolyte. Now, what they allow to communicate is that number one, now they allow smaller particles and they create a barrier. They serve as gate function. That is what occluding junction serves as. Now, example of occluding junction is what we call tight junction. Tight what? Tight junction. Now we have a particular protein over here. Just two proteins are very important. We have occluding protein. Then we have clotting protein. So now occluding protein and clotting protein, they are the ones found in this particular place. So now what are the examples of this occluding junction? A typical example of that is a tight junction. So this tight junction now, where can we find it in human body? You can find in the blood-brain barrier, BBB. This is that. Brain barrier selects a lot of things to pass through there. Number two, you can also find in the wall of capillaries. You can also find it in the renal tubes. You see that in the renal tubes, that is where you find it. Okay, that is what we have about the occluding. You see, that's where you can find in the occluding junction. Now let's move to communicating junction. When we talk about communicating junction, this allows the communications of molecules and ion between cells to cell. You see that. Now this one does not allow it. This one allows the communication. Now you see now there's a gap over here for cell to communicate ion and other molecules with each other. So now when we talk about communicating junction, a typical example of communication junction is what we call gap junction. You see that we call the gap what? Gap junction. Another name for gap junction is something like Lesox. See that? Science for that what? Lesox. Alright. So now where can we find gap junction now? Where which part of the body can we find gap junction? You can find it in the heart muscles. That's where you find them. Number two, now you can also find them in the chemical synapses. You can find them over there in the brain. This is what we're saying now. Chemical synapses in the brain. That's where you can find them. So what is the particular protein that you see over here? They call it protein connections or connexin. This is now they call it connections. Alright, that is what you see over there. They call it connexin or what? Connexin. That's where we have the communicating junction. Alright, so let's say the last one that we have, we call it the anchoring junction. When we talk about anchoring junction are type of junction that are found in a part of the body wherever there is mechanical stress. This is that mechanical stress. They provide mechanical attachment for a cells. That's what it does. So now when we have anchoring junction, you find them in a part of the body wherever there is mechanical stress very well because they provide mechanical attachment for that particular cell and maintain structural integrity. Now anchoring junction what are the types of anchoring junction that we can have? They are classified into two based on the protein that we are going to see there. See that we will have actin filament. Here is actin filament. This is that based on actin filament. The attachment can be based on actin filament protein. The attachment can also be based on intermediate filament. This is that intermediate filament protein. Alright, so now class, let's see that based on the actin filament, we have two things over there. Number one, now we have adherence. You see that. Adherence provide cell to cell communication. This is that cell to cell communication. That is what adherence provide. Now, a particular protein is in adherence. Now, we have what we call what? Cadherin. You see that? Cadherin. That is what we have over there. So now, for the next one that we have focal. We have focal adhesion. Now, focal adhesion now they provide communication between cell and extracellular matrix. Cell to what? Extracellular matrix. Cell to matrix. Alright, cell to matrix, that is what they provide. So now a particular protein that you see over here is integrins. You see that? See the integrins protein. Alright, so what of intermediate filament attachment? They also provide two. They also based on intermediate filament attachment, you can also have two things over here. We have desmosis. Alright. So for desmosis now, another name for desmosis, they call it macular adherence. Macular adherence, that is what they call that, macular adherence. So now for desmosis now, we are going to have cardioenzymes because they provide cell-to-cell communication. Cell-to-cell communication. Then the protein that you see over here is cardioenzyme. Okay, the next one that we have is early desmosis. Early desmosis. So for early desmosis now, we also provide cell to matrix communication. Cell to what? To matrix communication. That is when you see them, and they are formed by what? Intermediate filament. So now, what are their examples? This guy will be found in most of. We see them in skin. You see them in the basal membrane of what's it called now, of epithelial tissue. You also see them. You see this the focal adherence. You see them in basal membrane of epithelial tissue mostly. That's where you see them. Then for the desmosis are mostly found in skin because there's more mechanical impact in the skin. Then for any desmosis, you find it in basal membrane of epithelial tissue. Then here too, for the what's it called now, after the heart module now, you can also find the gap junction can also be found in the basement membrane of epithelial tissue, where the epithelial tissue communicates with the underlying tissue, which is laminar profile. All right, thank you for watching. Make sure you like my video, subscribe, and share with your family and friends. Thank you. God bless you.